Today I'm going to be focusing on my own experience of a manual breast pump versus an electric breast pump. If you want to hear all about that, then keep on watching. Hello and welcome to today's video. This is one that I'm making as a follow-up to my recent video, which was all about how I've continued breastfeeding my son since returning to work. So if you want to hear how I do that, I will link that video in the description box down below as well. But today I'm going to be focusing on my own experience of a manual breast pump versus an electric breast pump. So if you want to hear all about that, then keep on watching. New to my channel, I thought I'd give you a quick background history of my breastfeeding journey so far. I've not been pumping solely, I've been pumping to sort of supplement our breastfeeding routine, if that makes sense. And it also now helps me, now I'm back at work, I will express some milk so that my son has got some of my milk in a bottle when I'm back at work. So I don't express purely, I have breastfed and I've also given my son bottles of my breast milk since he's been born. Yeah, we've been fortunate enough to have pumping as an addition to our breastfeeding routine. I guess my experience is going to be completely different to someone who's been solely pumping. Hopefully that makes sense. I thought I'd just clear that up to begin with. So if you're in a similar position to me and you're looking to pump on the side of breastfeeding, this is probably going to be more helpful for you. So the manual breast pump that I have been using is the Medela one. I've been using this for a couple of months now, but at the start of my breastfeeding journey, I actually used an electric breast pump. I'll insert a cutaway of the one that I'm going to be talking about. So these are the comparisons that I'm going to be making in this video, the Medela manual pump and the Novice digital breast pump, which was what I used at the start of my breastfeeding journey. I thought I would just round up some of the pros and cons that I found to using an electric breast pump versus a manual breast pump. So I'm going to talk about the Novice digital breast pump first, and like I say, I'm going to have to insert some cutaways while I'm talking about it because it's quite difficult to hold up because there are a lot of components to it, but I'll get onto that in a minute. The pros that I found for an electric breast pump is that obviously it does all of the pumping for you. You've not got the manual sort of motion of having to pump. An electric breast pump is going to do that for you. So I would probably imagine that an electric breast pump would be more suitable for people who exclusively pump, because it's probably just a little bit easier if you're pumping throughout the day rather than have to manually do it, if that makes sense. Another thing that I found could be quite useful about having an electric breast pump is there's sort of different modes. You can set it to whatever suits you, and there's also like a little timer and it counts it down, or it times how long you've been pumping for. So that's quite helpful if you are going to be maybe exclusively pumping, so you can like set the power of how strongly it pumps. So obviously if you're new at the start, you might not want the suction to be too hard to begin with and stuff. That was about the only pros that I actually found of using an electric breast pump. For me, it didn't really work. I didn't enjoy it at all. I found it more of a chore, the electric breast pump. And the downside to the electric breast pump, the one that I used anyway, was that Novice breast pump was very noisy. It had a really loud suction to it and it had a sort of mechanical noise. I didn't find it enjoyable, and there were so many parts to it. There was obviously, because there's like a main part of the machine, and then there's a lead, and then there's obviously a lead to the power source. And because there's all these components to it, you're definitely restricted in your movements. You've sort of got to stay in one place if you're pumping through an electric pump, and I did not like that at all about it. I just felt very restricted. I felt like I was, I don't know, making milk on production. I just really didn't enjoy that aspect of it, and because of the fact that you had to be restricted to, you've got to be near a power source and stuff like that, it just felt a little bit more limited to me, and I just found it more of a chore because I kind of had to set aside some time where I knew my husband had to be around to look after Elliot, our son, because obviously I was tied up to this machine. So yeah, it was very noisy and mechanical sounding in my opinion, and I just found it quite restrictive because I was confined to this area of pumping. And I also, the fact that there were so many parts to the electric breast pump, I found it quite time consuming, because you had to set it up and you had to sort of be in the right area of the house, and I don't know, it really wasn't for me at all. I just dreaded doing it when it was the electric pump, all tied up and all confined, whereas when you've got a manual pump like this, it is literally just, you can just do it wherever you want really. And for me, because I wasn't exclusively pumping, I just found the manual one so much more convenient, because here it is. I mean, there are literally, I think, about 4 or 5 parts to this, and it's so easy to put together. Obviously you've got this bit, and your breast and your nipple go into the center of that, and then this bit comes off and it just pops into your sterilizer. And yeah, I think there's 5 components to it, and it's really quick and simple to put together. It's not all time consuming, so obviously with the electric one, you've got the machine, you've got 2 lots of cables, you've got the cable that's to the electric source, and you've got the cable from the machine to the pump. I just found it really a faff to have to set it up, and I just love the fact that you can pump wherever you want with this one, even if it's just around your house. I can sit, if my son, now he's a little bit older, obviously I couldn't do this when he was young, if he's in his play gym on the floor, I can just sit with him on the floor, look over him. It's not quite so restrictive as being all tied up to the electric breast pump. Yeah, and you're free to move around the house as well, and it's just, yeah, so much less restrictive using a manual breast pump. And to be honest with you, I find that this drains the breast just as well, if not better, than the electric breast pump. Somehow, I don't know how, but this has got really powerful suction on the manual breast pump, which is very surprising really. You wouldn't think that it would be as powerful as the electric one, but I have got just as much milk from the manual breast pump in the same amount of time as I was getting from the electric one. So if you think, oh, I'm not probably going to get as much milk from a manual breast pump, if you've got the supply there, you can get just as much out of this. So obviously the sort of further back you pump this, the more suction it has, if that makes sense. It's just so much more convenient, the manual breast pump, in my opinion. It's also not as noisy, it's not got that mechanical noise. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear, but that's the kind of noise that it makes. It's a little bit less when it's actually like attached to your breast, because there's not that air gap kind of thing, but it's not as noisy, it's not quite as mechanical feeling, and I actually just felt a little bit more sort of empowered by pumping when I wasn't all sort of tied up. There was just something demeaning about being tied up. I'm not sure, maybe it's just my own opinion, but I really didn't like the electric breast pump. It just kind of felt like you were there to produce this milk, whereas you can be a lot more flexible with a manual breast pump. You can still get just as much milk. So I mean, if you are exclusively pumping and you're not enjoying an electric breast pump for the reasons that I've said, you know, you feel a little bit tied up and stuff like that, you can get just as much milk out of a manual breast pump, which I didn't really know that before I started pumping. I kind of would have assumed that an electric breast pump is better for getting more milk, but the suction on the manual breast pump is very impressive. Quick little story here. I actually, when I was in hospital with my son for the first 5 days of his life, I was using a Medela. It wasn't an electric breast pump, but it was a hospital grade one, to help get my supply up. Obviously when you're at the hospital and you're sort of sat there, you've got all this time on your hands, it kind of didn't bother me being tied up to the machine as much. So Medela is obviously a very good brand of breast pump, if they use it in hospitals especially, and I think that that electric one did get my supply up in the first place. But to be honest with you, the suction on the manual one is exactly the same as the electric, so I don't see why, if you're managing to breastfeed as well, this will help get your supply. I have a baby that used to sort of just feed from one boob at a time, and I remember before I had my son reading in the sort of books, and when you read about breastfeeding it sort of used to say, oh yeah, offer your baby both your boobs. But my baby was sort of, he would drain one boob and then fall asleep, so then you'd end up with this other boob that was quite full. So a manual breast pump is really good for situations like that, because you can just pop it in your sterilizer, and then if your baby has fed from one side and then they don't want any more, you can drain the other side. You've got some milk in a bottle. I do recommend doing a little bit of pumping if you're exclusively breastfeeding like I was. It's a good idea to just give your baby a bottle, you know, every other day, so that they're used to taking a bottle. Your partner can then also share the experience of feeding as well, so that your baby doesn't just associate mummy as the sort of source of food and stuff. So yeah, I would highly recommend a manual breast pump over an electric breast pump, particularly if you are managing to breastfeed okay. You can use it to sort of complement your breastfeeding routine like I have done. I kind of wish that I'd have known a little bit more about manual breast pumps before I spent the money on the electric one, because I think it was about £65, the newbie one. It just wasn't really for me. Maybe had my breastfeeding journey have been different and I was needing to pump a little bit more, I might have got on, or I might have had to get on with the electric one a little bit better. But at the same time, like I've just said, the manual breast pump gets just as much milk from your breast as an electric one, so there's no reason why you couldn't just go straight to a manual breast pump to even help your supply if you're in your early days of breastfeeding. You're just so much less restricted with a manual one. So hopefully this little quick fire video of my experience of an electric breast pump versus a manual breast pump has been a little bit useful for you. I wish that I had watched a video like this, like I say, before I started pumping, because I could have saved myself quite a lot of money and just picked up this manual breast pump, which I think is under £20, or is around the £20 mark, and I've got so much more use out of it than the electric one. But that's just my experience. I know that there are a lot of electric breast pumps out there on the market, so do your research and you might find one that's like not quite as noisy as the one that I tried. But yeah, I wouldn't exactly recommend the newbie digital breast pump. It wasn't for me, and I'm much preferring a manual breast pump over an electric one. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you found it useful. Give it a big thumbs up if you have. Hit the subscribe button down below, and I'll see you again for another video. Thank you so much. Bye.